Brilliant. Okay. Well, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us. I know you're all really here to sort of hear from Matty and Amanda rather than myself, but just for context, I'm Emma Layton, the Chief Operating Officer at Thrive. So I oversee the processes and ways of working for both of our product teams, so LXP and, of course, more importantly for today, the content stuff, and kind of aligning those across the business with our other departments. Matty and Amanda, I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Yeah, after you, Amanda.
Hi everyone, great to be here today and share a little bit about our learning team story and also our story around self-led learning culture, in the hope that you get some tips. Quite an ambitious title for this webinar, so no pressure for me and Matty, but lovely to meet you all and really look forward to sharing our story with you.
And hi everyone, I'm Matty. I'm Learning Design Manager at GVC, so I look after all of our content stuff internally and how we package and deliver our learning. And my first time doing something like this for an external company, so looking forward to it to see if people take value or I just talk a load of waffle, but hopefully it's the former.
Definitely not waffle, very interesting stuff. So the format for today will be slightly different to our usual webinars. I'll be sort of quizzing Matty and Amanda on how they've created a strong culture of self-led learning at GVC. But before we start with that, I thought it'd be nice to have a bit of background on who GVC are. If you don't know the name, then you will definitely know the brands. The GVC group was formed in 2004, but their brands have been making history really since 1880s. Big brands like bwin, Ladbrokes, Coral, Gala, and many more sports betting and gaming companies. They're credited with making the world's biggest live event even more memorable, and more importantly, they're doing it responsibly. They currently have over 24,000 colleagues across 5 continents, but they all have one purpose. Everything they do is for the good of entertainment. GVC are now one of over 40 of our off-the-shelf content clients, and probably one of the most aligned in terms of their learning culture and strategy. So today I just really wanted to find out how they came across our content and also how they're using it to drive better self-directed learning experiences. So Matty's going to start us off. Do you want to start by sharing the story of how our partnership came about?
Yeah, so we met at Learning Tech, the event that they do in London every year. And it's probably good for me to give everybody some context about why we ended up there, because I think it talks to the kind of partners that you Thrive are. So it's a really interesting time for us commercially and culturally for our business. We were just coming to the end of a major piece of integration and after the back of a large scale acquisition. At the time we had 35 brands, I think it was, 24,000 people across 22 different offices, 5 continents, as well as quite a large retail estate. And they all had legacy, different learning behaviors, ideas, practices, and catalogues. And after the piece of work was done around aligning all of our brands under a clear purpose and set of strategic priorities, we then knew what we were aiming for in terms of our learning culture, what we had to catch up to, what we needed to enable. We did have quite a big problem to start with, which I think is probably true of a lot of organizations, is we weren't as tuned into those existing learning cultures as we needed to be. Our data wasn't sophisticated enough, and we weren't joined up enough with certain people within the business in order for us to fairly say, what do our people learn and how do they typically go about learning it? We had a lot of content, don't get me wrong. We'd inherited a lot of like classroom traditional type stuff and e-module catalogues. Some of it was really good and our people liked doing it, but we didn't really have anything that told us whether it was adding value, whether it was making a difference to business performance. So we knew we had that big piece of work to do in front of us to integrate all of that legacy stuff. And we were quite realistic that would take a lot of time, and we didn't want to slow down learning whilst that went on. And that's why we ended up at Learning Tech, is that we were shopping for new high quality off-the-shelf learning libraries that covered a broad range of topics, that spoke to the types of things our people wanted, that they could engage with straight away, that would allow us the time to go back and do all of that legacy work. And for me, I thought I went to that event, it was my first time, and I thought I had quite a simple wish list. I was looking for something that was bite-sized, it wasn't too labour-intensive to complete. it felt modern in its design, that it could be uploaded quite seamlessly into a system, that it was more engaging than just, your typical drag and drop and videos that look like they're filmed in the 80s, that the library would grow with modern challenges, and that it was fairly priced. Let's be real, we're all professionals here. Online learning itself is not going to shift behaviour or increase performance without a lot of other work to go around it. So I thought that should be reflected in the cost. And honestly, that was like hunting for a snow leopard in the wild. We went to stand after stand. So many providers lined up to tell us that they had all the solutions to our learning problems, that their platforms would guarantee our people spent more time learning. I think most of the content we viewed, it was either quite corporate and quite dry for our business, or it really talked down to the learner like they'd never worked before. And we're quite casual. We achieve really good results. We have that kind of work hard, play hard environment here. So the learning needed to be stretching, but it also needed to be fun to take part in. Looking back, I don't recall anybody actually asking us what we were hoping to achieve with our e-learning content above getting more people to learn. It was so busy. We just queued about an hour for lunch. I still remember it. I had a wild mushroom and cheese panini. I was sat at a table with two teammates, and we were trying to justify to ourselves, how do we sack this off and then go back and explain to our boss why we didn't stay for the rest of the day. And a colleague had said there was one stand he wanted to visit because it had caught his eye. So he said, okay, we'll go back, we'll have one last look. And that stand happened to be Thrives. And I still remember really vividly walking to it, how unique it was against that backdrop of white tabletop stands with the free pens on. You can see it there. It almost felt like a mini apartment setup with the exposed brick, and you had music playing, there was pick and mix. The content was on show, and it seemed like an army of people to speak to. You all looked like you were having the time of your lives, and you were really happy to be there. You were all really engaged in conversations with people. In fact, we actually had to queue for a while to have somebody free. And while we were waiting, we found a flyer that had a long list of topics on it and a big 5K graphic at the bottom. And I remember thinking, oh, all these topics you cover, you've got the traditional stuff like the leadership, management, comm stuff. But there was also what felt like more current topics like mental health and unconscious bias, sexual harassment, things like that. Skim reading it, I incorrectly made the assumption that each topic of content was 5K each, because I was just connecting the topic with the graphic. And then I spoke to Cassie, the head of marketing that introduced this webinar. And I remember how different that conversation was. She seemed to take a genuine interest in how our day was going and what we thought of the stand. But what really stood out for me was that you didn't tell us about Thrive. You asked us about our business. There was no attempt to feature dump of what your platform could do, or a hard sell that you would be the one to rescue us from all of our learning woes. You asked us how our business was structured, what our approach to learning was, and what we were looking for that day. And then she answered some questions and had really helpfully set up some meetings with some account managers within your business. And I remember we actually walked away thinking, what's the catch? After Cassie had clarified it was 5K for the entire library. And we did that deal. We were really happy. We were just about to launch some of the content into the business, and Amanda joined, and this little thing called COVID happened. And that led us to rethink our approach to self-led learning.
Amazing. Thanks for that, Matty. Really interesting story. And I think, one of the things that really stands out for me on that is that the goal you set yourself.
I don't know if it's just me, Emma, but I've lost you.
I can't hear you either.
Yeah, sorry, Emma. I think you've dropped out there.
So before this webinar,
there you go, you're back.
Sorry.
Oh, we lost you there, Emma. We didn't get any of that.
Oh.
We heard what stood out for me, and then the rest was silent.
Oh no, sorry guys. I don't know why that happened. My internet seems to be all right today.
Yeah, you're back in there. So I'm just going to pick up from that.
Or maybe not.
That was famous last words, wasn't it?
Famous last words. Okay, I'll pick up on this little bit and do the poll anyway. So we wanted to get a bit of a competency check of everyone who's on here. So we're going to start off with a question asking all of you, how many of your learners are currently practicing self-led learning? So if I just launch the poll there, I think you're back, Em. So if everyone starts voting on the poll now, hopefully you can see it, and then we can get a bit of an idea of where we are and what we're working with. And it seems to be a huge variety at the moment. So the majority, we're looking at about 30 to 40% are 0 to 20%. So let's just get these last views in, then I'll be able to end the poll and share it with you all. A few more coming in. Okay, so if I share the results there, can you all see the results?
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
I'll hand back over to you now, Em.
Lovely, thank you. Sorry, I don't know what happened there because everything seems to be fine. See how we get on. But yeah, really interesting poll. So how many of your learners, can you publish the results, Cassie? I can't seem to see them. I don't know if it's because I'm sharing my screen. Or can you just summarise them to me?
Yes, absolutely. So 0 to 20%, we're on about 30% of people who have 0 to 20% of their learners practicing self-led learning. 30% of people on the webinar today have about 20 to 40% of people practicing self-led learning. Then it goes down to 18% have about 40 to 60. 12% have about 60 to 80. And the smallest percentage, which is what we expected, which is why we're all here today, has about 80 to 100% of their employees practicing self-led learning. So the majority have less and the minority have more.
Great, okay, well that's interesting because like you say, that aligns with what we're trying to achieve today. So without further ado, I'll kind of move on to a little bit more about how GVC have actually led their self-led learning culture. So let's start with you, Amanda. How did you decide that it was time for self-led learning at GVC?
Great question, Emma. Thank you. And not a straightforward answer, actually. Great to be here today. And I think what I'm going to share is not just our tips around building a self-led learning culture, but our tips around how we've done it in 2020. So with a slightly different lens and with like probably most people on this call, with a new set of challenges, under new circumstances, brand new ways of working, and under conditions that none of us are used to. And if anything, I think that's probably helped us out a little bit. But I'll talk to you a little bit about that as I go through. Matty talked beautifully about kind of the evolution of our business and where we were headed and what that meant for us as a learning function. And part of why I joined GVC back at the beginning of the year was exactly that, to work with the team to help really build out our culture, to really focus on how do we enable learning in our business and build a really future-focused learning culture where our people could feel like they really had an opportunity to grow their careers, to really learn, to feel like they were invested in, but they were also at the center of what we did. And that was always a bit of an aspiration, if I'm honest. It was something that was probably going to be 2 years out from where we started out. And where we started out was in a hotel room in Hemel Hempstead, of all places, which was a brilliant experience. We had 2 days together as a team, and for a lot of us, it was our first time in meeting, so it was a pretty big deal. We spent 2 days brainstorming all the stuff that we were working on, and there was heaps of it. We had a whole wall in the training room dedicated to what we were working on, what programs there were, what the kind of self-led stuff was woven in between it, and we kind of agreed what our roadmap was. What are we going to nail our flag against the mast to? What are we going to deliver in 2020? And we had really big plans. We were all set to go. We had our first ever senior leadership program kind of designed, ready to be delivered the following week. We had our kind of people manager program all booked in, scheduled in people's diaries. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, COVID hit and literally disrupted everything, even down to the fact that I had my suitcase packed, ready to go away to our first leadership event, and very quickly had to unpack and rethink about not only how we were going to do work, but also about what life looked like. And I'll never forget that first week of lockdown. Everybody was in a bit of a spin. How do we really quickly, not just us in the learning function, but more broadly across our HR team, how do we stand up and really support our business through this period of change? And our very first meeting, and I laugh every time I think about this now, there's Matty, myself, and a couple of other people on the team. We coupled up with our comms function, and we very quickly were tasked with scrabbling together a top 10 tips for working at home, thinking that was all that people would probably need at that point. And I won't ever bring our top 10 tips out as best practice around a self-led learning culture, but just goes to show how much we've had to adapt and rethink and really kind of move from day to day, rather than being more planful and thought out and in a line with the roadmap that we'd done. We really quickly discovered this was something much bigger, and actually we didn't just need tips. Yes, tips and advice and support for how to kind of cope with the changing environment was really necessary. We really quickly learned that there was a really big skills development piece that we had an opportunity to really support our people with during that period. And so I think it was the skills development. How do we help people cope and survive, but also how do we help them really thrive through this period and also perform, right? So I think like all of us on this call, we all had business objectives that we were all still looking to meet under pretty tough circumstances. So we had a real opportunity as a learning team to enable our people to learn the skills to lead in this new environment like never before. And important to mention, probably again, like most of you, our leaders hadn't led remotely before. Most of our people hadn't worked remotely before. So everybody was going through their own version of navigating this new experience of work-life balance, and what did that mean? How did I need to behave now? Matty's going to tell you a little bit about what we built, how we got to what those skills were, and how we went about packaging that out and supporting our people with that. But I think for us it was about us coming together as a team, really pulling together, and not only seeing an opportunity to build out some content to enable our people, but also an opportunity to build some learning communities, something that was new to us and really almost spoke to that aspirational culture piece that we knew that we wanted to do at some point around self-led learning. And love Matty's story about connecting with you guys at Thrive. I think having a great partner and amazing content is a brilliant place to start in terms of self-led learning. You can't do it without that, but it's not enough. If you're serious about culture change, you've got to be really intentional about it. And I suppose in spite of us having to rip up our roadmap, what we did have was the opportunity to really think about, how do we as a learning function want to stand up and play and be known for and be famous for, and how do we want to operate? And it was an opportunity for us to step back and go, is now the time to kind of really rethink that, how we brand ourselves, how we show up. So whilst we were building out a self-led virtual learning package program, call it what you like, we also took a bit of a brave move to step back, look at our team format, look at our team brand, and decide to do business a little bit differently. So the first thing we did, none of this was done lightheartedly either. We had lots of internal debate and discussion. Is now the right time? Do we wait until this period of change and ambiguity is over, or do we just go for it? And we decided to go for it. It's a little bit in tune with our culture here at GVC. And we decided the first thing to do was we ditched the D. So we stopped being known as the learning and development team, and we became the learning team. And that was less about being cool and funky and looking like we had a good brand, and more around, actually, our job isn't here to do the development for our people. Our job is to set the scene, to enable great learning to happen, but for our people to take charge of that and to develop themselves. So it was a real intentional decision. But we did more than that. We shook up our squad. And we decided now is the really good time to introduce a learning business partner model. So a model where we could go really deep into our business, really understand what our business was, what was happening in our business, really understand what they needed, and how we could provide learning solutions as opposed to serving them. And it didn't stop there. We also really changed the rest of the team as well. Everybody in the team got into a new position, and again, all of this during the height of COVID, which is a real credit to the team, an awesome bunch of people. And we built an internal design house, which was really new to us. We'd never ever taken that approach before. We built a team around learning tech, because we very quickly decided that if we were going to go towards a self-led learning culture, then we needed to have the tech and the systems and the enablement to make that happen. We built out a team purely around learning experience, and we also brought our retail training team into the fold, and they became part of our gang as well. So a really joined up end-to-end learning team who are really going to be connected and joined up and look after our all business. We didn't just kind of change job titles, change org charts, change the name. We spent days together on us. We got to know each other as a team and had lots of fun along the way. But then we also had some tough times, right? We crafted our why together, and that wasn't a straightforward exercise. We kind of really played around with what can we all buy into, what works for all of us, that we're all prepared to kind of go, yeah, I'm committed to that why. I really feel like part of that. And then we agreed a set of team principles. What are we gonna be known for? What are we gonna stand up for? What do we all commit to? And get in shape to really play the game of our lives, not just through COVID, but beyond that as well. And then I think the funny thing, and Matty and I were talking about it this morning, and actually that it's interesting to see the results of that poll. They were actually higher than I thought, and I myself went quite low on that, even though we're here to talk about a self-led learning culture. This isn't going to happen overnight, right? Ditching the D, changing the team job titles and the formation isn't going to create a learning culture. We have to start really helping our business understand why. So why have we taken away that concept of having a list of training or a catalogue, so to speak, where people can select from it? One of the other things we did and really quickly discovered that we had training request forms hidden everywhere internally. So we were like, let's do away with all of that. Let's make it difficult for people to ask for learning. Let's make it really about a conversation, and let's make sure that our business partners are in the business having those conversations, rather than it's an anonymous request coming through a system. And that was really pertinent in our journey for this culture, and really painful at points. We're still on the real beginning of that journey, and it's really important for us as a team. And in a short space of time, I think it's been really meaningful to see how we've shown up. Everybody believes in it. We're all playing in different positions, but our desire to lead to build a self-led learning culture is still an aspirational one. We've got a bit of a way to go. You'll see that in addition to all of that stuff, we've actually put our motto underneath our learning team brand. And our motto is exactly that, a self-led learning culture. What does that mean for our people? It means learning is driven by you as an individual, not done to you, not served on you by a team sitting somewhere. It's a learning culture where your boss is your coach, where it is led by our leaders. And we've got some work to do in terms of upskilling our leaders to really land that. And then us, we're just the enablers that are sat here really looking to enable the right stuff at the right time. I'm going to finish off now before handing back to you, Emma, but on a real reflective point, I think, whereas COVID's been tough personally and professionally, I think, and although we didn't probably see it at the time, looking back now, as much as it panicked me, because I'm pretty organised at the time, being forced to remove all of our programmatic stuff and unpack my suitcase, do away with our traditional programs and approach, was an amazing opportunity for us to kickstart our journey to build a self-led learning culture. We were able to accelerate the plans that we could only dream of when we first started out. And actually what we've been able to do is show our people the real value that this could bring, rather than have to sell the concept and make them feel like we were taking something off them. So we're ahead of where we'd like to have been, but to your points here, it's really about that ongoing ownership, providing flexibility and empowering our people really to kind of take the reins and drive their own development.
Amazing, thank you. And I think there's so many things in there that will resonate with everyone else listening today. I mean, even myself, you know, the thing about really sort of taking a step back and rethinking everything at the minute, and kind of some points about, you know, giving people the tools to develop themselves rather than kind of prescribing ways of learning to them is so important. But also, the biggest thing for you guys, I think, is that what really comes across is that the people are just at the centre of everything. And I think that's why you are finding such, well, in my opinion, such great success with everything you're doing. So thank you very much for that, Amanda. To move on, Matty, like, can you tell us a bit more about what the blended program was made up of and how you integrated our content with all the other stuff that you wanted to get across during that time?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to talk specifically around the management program that we delivered during lockdown, because I think that's the best example of how we tried to enable self-led learning in the business. We were really, really lucky that during the pandemic, our operation didn't really slow down. In fact, in a lot of areas, it rapidly accelerated. And we had a lot of conversations, as Amanda mentioned, about what the right response from our team should be. And whilst those were going on, we also had various third parties coming to us and pitching their solutions. In fact, there were a couple of suppliers that had piqued the interest of some senior figures within the business. So we needed to respond quickly with what our view was, whatever that became. And at the time, as Amanda mentioned, our model was primarily buy, not build. So we would typically outsource something like that. But we did decide really early on that we wanted to own this in-house. We really felt that this was a brand new, challenging situation for us. And we knew our people better than a third party could. And we really wanted them to see that this was more than just a financial investment. It wasn't just us throwing money at an issue, buying some stuff and saying problem solved, go back to work. It was important that there was the acknowledgement of how challenging this was, and that we didn't have all the answers, but we would find our way through it together. And there we were, like a brand new team under lockdown, not used to designing our stuff ourselves really, suddenly drawing up a plan for a 14-week program. I think from the moment of sign off from the group HRD, we had 4 days to be ready to launch. So we really did learn ourselves as we went. I had in my diary every day for 4 months a call about this project with Amanda. So it was quite intense. It was really important to me that we didn't focus on any type of vanity metrics like completion or engagement data. And instead, we offered real, genuine support for our people. Initially, we didn't really consider what the delivery mechanism would be, whether we put it on an LMS or how long the content should be or anything like that. We talked a lot about what our people might go through in the next few weeks and what would be of actual use to them. And for me, kind of one of my mantras, learning is an action, it's not passive. So if you want learning to take place, you need to create the right conditions to allow that to happen. So if we frame what we did in the context of how do you enable self-led learning, I had a few core principles that we built the program around. So the first one, I would say, in a heightened stress situation, it's important that you work with the brain and not against it for any chance of learning to take place. Oh, you're going to my wrap-up slide. Okay, we'll jump back. Yeah.
Oh, so sorry.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. You can stay there. I will cover these off. So work with the brain, not against it. Essentially, it's important that you apply neuroscientific principles to anything that you deliver. I'm personally a fan of the AGES framework, attention, generation, emotion, and spacing. But essentially ensure that from the get-go, people's brains are in the best possible condition with everything else going on around them that they can actually learn. So for me, if you want to enable self-led learning, that's one of the areas you must start. All of your content itself must be built in a way that works with the brain. If it's too difficult for learners to connect with, then they won't engage. I think the second big thing for me was, we all know an essential part of learning success is you need to be able to remember what you learned later down the line. And we know that we form stronger neural pathways when the memory is centered around a social interaction, particularly with figures that matter to us. So we thought a lot about the importance of community and enabling as much socialization of learning, as well as leveraging expertise from really prolific leaders within the business, not just to push things out from a faceless HR or L&D team. So I would say 2 and 3 for self-led learning would be enable as much socialization as possible and leverage the expertise of the really well-known people within your business. And finally, one of the big things I thought about was human behavior and as being creatures of habit. And what often helps in times of ambiguity is a ritual or a routine. I remember for weeks, the country would stop every day at 5 p.m. for those political updates on the pandemic. And you might not have liked what you heard, but I think there was something comforting about knowing it would happen at that time each day. It brought terms of certainty to such an ambiguous situation. So another good idea when you're going for that self-led learning piece is to deliver it at a predictable pace, not just publish a big library out there. Make sure your people know what they can access and when they can get it. We talked a lot about not wanting this to be a huge addition to anyone's to-do list. You know, these people, they had 1,000,001 new things to consider, and we didn't want to add to that stress. People's focus was rightly on other things, their families, their teams, how they were doing. I think we were likely at the time to be able to get people's attention for maybe 10 or 20 minutes at a time, if we were lucky. So all the learning, it needed to be short, engaging, and easily accessible within their flow of work. I think if we'd have attempted to interrupt people's days by pushing out traditional mandatory e-modules or just moving lengthy classroom programs online, I don't think we would have gotten the audience that we did. So all that thinking led us to a 14-week roadmap of learning. If you jump back a couple of slides, you'll see what we covered. The one before that. Yeah, that was the roadmap of what we delivered. Well, half of it, it was double that. And we thought they were things that would help people organize their thoughts, feel less isolated, and keep theirs and their team's performance on track. And you can see here the topics we decided to explore. We gave each of them 3 objectives to hook the content around. We debated a lot on what the right stuff to cover was, and it changed. Halfway through, the final module we were working towards originally was called Returning to Normal, but that became apparent very quickly that wasn't going to happen. So we changed it to Readying for the Future. So really adapting to in-the-moment skills needs. And at the time, I was seeing a lot of organizations, their approach with all of the best of intentions was to offer a large library of new stuff for their people to engage with. And I thought in the grand scheme of things, at that moment, it was probably quite overwhelming for a learner to have all that pushed at you. I never wanted anybody that engaged with us to think, where do I even start? Or this is too much for me to consider. So we gave a lot of thought to the ordering and the length. 14 weeks was our best guess at the time. But whatever we did, it needed to be agile. We needed to be prepared that it would work if we had to cut it short or extend it based on the developments at the time. And I wanted to ensure that we didn't interrupt people's flow of work, but we supported it. So participants, they needed to be able to dip in and out, take what they needed, but crucially have the ability to ignore what they didn't. And then if you go on to the next slide, this is what it looked like in terms of how we delivered it in terms of a rhythm. So we designed this around read, do, discuss, listen, involve, and reflect. So what this was, Read was a curation of thought leadership pieces and high-level research findings. Some were from external sources like Harvard Biz and McKinsey, people like that. And we wrote some ourselves. We'd always try and ground it in the context of what was going on in the business at the time. This would be exercises and activities for you to complete either by yourself or with your team. Sometimes it was Thrive content, sometimes it was a video to watch, sometimes it was an activity that we designed, but it was always something that required application, not just thinking. Discuss was where we really leveraged the expertise of our people. We'd have directors, heads of, and senior subject matter experts write pieces about the topic that we were covering at the time and what it meant for them. And that was designed to encourage discussion and have other people share their experiences too. Listen, we built and delivered a series of podcasts that we titled Leadership Lessons, where the guests were the most senior leaders in the business, and we conducted in-depth career story interviews with them, and they shared all of their learnings around particular topics that we were discussing. Involved was a series of webinars that we delivered online. All people managers across the world were invited, and we'd spend an hour. We'd introduce a bit of new thinking, but it was primarily about sharing ideas and experience. And then we would finish the topic on a reflect piece, and that would simply be a set of thought-provoking questions that we'd issue to encourage people to stop and think about what they'd learned and what they might do with it before we moved on. We focused on one topic at a time for about 2 weeks, and not only did that rhythm help with it, the blended approach, which we know is important to keep engagement with learning, but it really enabled learners to know when to look for the type of learning that they needed. And I think this was the best approach looking back, because it spoke to all the things I talked about around self-led learning, you know, the blend of content to keep attention, the length of the pieces and the spacing of it, the social opportunity, it being owned by experts within the business, the content being agile that you can dip in and out, but it's still predictable where and when you'll find it. The delivery method, if you're interested, if you click to the next slide, potentially bold statement considering who's hosting it, but at the time we had a traditional LMS. We didn't have like a social LXP that Thrive offer. So we decided not to use our LMS, and we just built a space out on our company intranet. So you can see there, it was kind of like little windows each, and it would refresh every 2 weeks that you could dip in and out, and we build the content as we went. So people could still comment and interact with each other as well as the content. And you can see there the Thrive content woven in, some of the do pieces. I think working safely through COVID, continuing with kindness. I think all of them on there actually, other than the final one of Unbind, I think was yours. And I just have to mention, and I'm not being paid or anything to say this, that you're partnering when we did this. So I remember when we originally designed that roadmap of what we wanted to cover, I sent it to Thrive. And just thought, you know, we've got this extensive library that we've already bought. We may as well see if we've got stuff that can support those objectives. And you came back within a day and you'd mapped a series of modules across that roadmap with what you thought would support those objectives. There were even some that you didn't have any content for at the time. And somebody called me and asked me how I envisaged that content being brought to life. And then I think within about a week, you'd built it. Which I'd never seen partnering of that scale before. That blew my mind. And that's what we did for 14 weeks. And by some miracle, it timed out perfectly that as we delivered the final module, the guidance then changed and lockdown was lifted. So we brought that roadmap to a formal close and moved on to the next step. I look back and I still don't know how we managed to do it, but it worked out.
Yeah, an amazing story. And, you know, I guess all of these examples you've shared just kind of speak for themselves, really. And I think particularly the comments around, you know, your agileness and being reactive to the situation. That's something that we can really relate to here, and hence why, in the case of you kind of coming to us with those ideas for content, we love hearing those stories and creating stuff that is practically relevant to people. So yeah, certainly, like if you have any ideas like that, if you are an existing client, then please do get in touch, because it's really interesting to kind of be inspired by what's going on in the world. Sorry for jumping forward to this. I just trying to keep up with the cadence of what you were saying. But yeah, no, really interesting takeaways there. And I'm sure Cassie will be sharing the slides following the webinar, so anyone can kind of have a look back at those. Okay, so to move on then, we've talked a lot about what you actually did and why you did it. What about the feedback and results you've seen? Can you talk me through those, Matty?
Yeah, so really quickly, bearing in mind that all we did in terms of a push was send out a few emails to our managers to launch it. There was no big marketing blitz. There was nothing that was mandatory. It was all opt-in. The level of engagement we got so spectacularly outstripped what I was expecting. In my head, I was thinking these people are really busy. Learning with all of the best of intentions often gets nudged down the to-do list, particularly in moments like a pandemic. So I thought what the poll results showed at the start, that if we got 10 to 20% engagement, I'm happy with that. That'll make a real difference to some people. Job well done. By the end of the program, we delivered in 14 weeks 111 new pieces of content. We'd hosted 13 webinars with more than 700 attendees. We'd had 13,000 views on content, 58% of total global leadership engagement, and that got involved. And we also got a really great level of anecdotal feedback from managers telling us what they'd done and how helpful they'd found it. And I really do think that was as a direct result of all the thinking we did early on about how you really enable self-led learning and creating the right conditions to service their agenda and not yours. And I'd say whilst that's the end of that program that we delivered, it's certainly not the end of how we're planning on keeping that self-led learning alive. Amanda, I don't know if you want to talk about the work that's ongoing and how we're going to keep trying to enable self-led learning.
Yeah, of course. It's definitely just the beginning for us. We're just starting out, but also at the same time really rethinking things. How do we shape up? How do we continue with the work that we've already got under our belt, and also kind of adapt to the environment that's still changing every day? And all of us across our different companies, our industries, will be knee deep in the same conversations about what does the future of work look like? What is my relationship with the office moving forward? And all of those questions are making us really think about what does the future of learning look like, and how are we going to stand up and show up and support our people with really great learning solutions that work for them and that fit in with work and life and office and home and all of those things that have just merged into one more than ever before. We're still finding our groove as a team. We're still really early days. We're kind of only a couple of months together, and although we've got some great wins under our belt, we have a long way to go. We're going to really get into and under the skin of our business and really help our business leaders and our people know why we've changed, know why we've taken this more self-led approach, but more importantly, let them really understand what's in it for them. I think we have a fresh purpose, an opportunity to revolutionize like never before, especially as a learning function. All of the things that we've probably known that we've needed to do for the last couple of years, we now have permission to do. I have a pretty strong personal view that whole programmatic and traditional learning piece will still have its place. I think that when we take people away from their working environments, whether that's a home or the office, to come together for what we would have probably called formal learning events, is going to look different. We're certainly going to use those opportunities for our people to come together and do cool stuff, right? So we're going to bring our people together, and that's the opportunity not to talk through theory about what does great leadership or great management look like. That's the opportunity to really get together, innovate, brainstorm, to be really creative, to test ideas, to coach each other on the ground, and to create that community and connection. But there's also that place for the self-led learning path, virtual learning piece that we now know has been so successful for us. We have validation that our people at GVC love to be in the driving seat, that they like to dip in and out at a time that suits themselves, that it really works for them. We know that they want to do it at their own pace, in their own time, and with their own learning agenda rather than ours pushed at them. And that's a real revolution for us. So I think future will look like, future skills, what's emerging out of this, what do we need now, but also what are those new skills going to look like for the future. We've all got completely different relationships with work, with our bosses, with our teams, with our peers, and with our stakeholders, and that means we're going to need to learn different ways of working, and how do we get the most out of those relationships and build really deep, successful connections. And then I think there's also for us our customer piece, and the way that our customers engage with us and use our products has changed. So we need to adapt to that as well and bear that in mind as we're building out stuff for the future. And us as a team, it's really important. I think more than ever, we've learned act and react. Do it with speed, but also really, really make time to stop and think and reflect. I think now more than ever, us as a learning function need to make sure that we're ahead of the game, that we focus on our learning, we continually upskill ourselves. We make sure that we're connected really to our business, and we're also really savvy about what's going on in the outside world. And then finally, I think it's about the culture and that journey that we just started, and making sure that whatever it is we deliver, however we deliver it, it's joined up, relevant, really meaningful in a way that has real, true business impact, but also in a way that really excites and engages our people.
Sounds amazing. The people at GVC are very lucky. And, you know, like I said, we'll talk a bit more about alignment, but I think certainly for us, these are all things that we really believe in, and it's really exciting to see you as a brand like holding some of this stuff to account. So thanks for that, Amanda. And then I guess a good place for us to kind of end on with your story is just, you know, any advice you'd give to anyone else who might be looking to achieve the same thing, or might be looking for a content partner. Yeah, just any kind of gems you can share, really.
So I have two. One of which you've almost just mentioned, Emma, around that kind of you being passionate about the stuff that we're passionate about. I think Matty alluded to it earlier as well. There are heaps of companies out there offering heaps of decent content, right? My first interaction with you guys at Thrive, and I know Cathy was on the call, we were having a conversation about performance management, and not just a conversation, we were having a debate about what does that look like now? What should our philosophy be around how do we support our people in achieving their goals and their learning? And actually, it was amazing to be sat around the table with a company that did content, but also had a view and were passionate about it as us. So that would be my number one tip. Find a supplier who's passionate about what you do and can feel like a real extension to your team. And then secondly, the temptation, I think, when you buy a library of content is to publish a library of content. So my advice would be don't. Wherever possible, remember what your business objectives are, what it is that you're looking to achieve, what skills that you're looking to develop right now, and use the content that's relevant and weave it in, similar to what Matty talked about, with everything else that you're doing, to make sure that it feels really meaningful and thought through, rather than, it's just a catalogue and choose what you fancy doing today.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. That's really helpful. And I think that word catalogue is really important, because when we talk about catalogue, like sometimes, you know, depending on the culture of the organisation, there can be a bit of that eye rolling. Certainly for us, it is not, you know, a bolt on. It is all about all the stuff you talked about, like integrating it with your learning and making sure that it's meaningful. And on that note, I thought maybe I should share a few of my favourite questions to ask when you're looking for a content partner as well. And actually, you know, they do kind of mirror what you've already said, Amanda. But there's kind of three questions that I usually pick out and say, you know, these are the sorts of things that might not immediately come to mind that you should probably ask of a content provider. And the first one is, what's the shelf life of a piece of content? And this is really about relevance, but also longevity, I guess. And here at Thrive, we don't just create content and then sort of leave it to gather dust in a catalogue. We regularly review it, and just to check that the kind of goals and behaviours of the content at a high level are still appropriate to the modern learner. And constantly kind of removing or updating stuff. Our leadership bundle, for example, I think we built that just over 2 years ago, and it's already been revised in line with like some modern thinking, because, you know, we're not wedded to anything. It's all about like reflecting what's going on in real organizations. Second question I would sort of recommend is, what does the relationship look like? So we've touched on that quite a lot in the discussion with Matty and Amanda. But, you know, what is it that you'll actually get? Are you just going to kind of, is it going to be quite transactional? Are you just going to be given all of these modules to kind of bolt onto your platform? Or are you going to have a true partner who will help you build real learner journeys and support you with the sort of stuff that Matty talked about earlier, in terms of coming to us and saying, we need some help with this, or we have some ideas for this, and kind of just supporting like those real learner journeys. And then finally, what is it that characterizes their content? So this is very similar to what Amanda was saying about alignment and making sure that, you know, you kind of share the same passions. But a bit more about the content, I guess, in terms of, you know, what is it that's important to you? Like for some organisations, it might be like rubber stamping by a specific body. For other people, it might be about the format. So you might, you know, not want e-learning, but you want video and that sort of thing. Or is it about what it achieves? So Matty and Amanda both talked about behavioural change and like people-centric kind of approaches, and that's very much what Thrive is about too. So there's definitely a lot of alignment there, and it just means that you can be sure that your chosen content provider can help you meet the goals that you want to meet. So just kind of close off that section. Just to sort of summarise a bit about our catalogue. As I talked about, it's a catalogue, but it's about creating real learner journeys. So everything we create is discrete and micro, so that it can be woven into you know, other types of learning. £5,000 per year with no user limit, so it's really affordable, and that's because we believe that quality content should be affordable. So like Matty said, there's no tricks, there's no kind of it's not that, you know, maybe perhaps it doesn't reflect pricing elsewhere, but for us it is all about giving people accessible, like you know, up to date and kind of relevant content, and you know, it's part of a bigger project for us. So certainly there's no secrets to that. It's all very transparent, and the process itself is super simple too. So you just need to speak to us if you'd like a demo, and we can have the files, all 130 of them, ready in seconds. So we'll give some contact details at the end if that's something you want to discuss with us. Okay, so a bit of reflection before we move on to the Q&A. We'll close off this section with another poll. So are you going to encourage more self-led learning? Having heard what Matty and Amanda have said, how has it inspired you? Give you a couple of seconds to answer that.
So we're getting some answers in, guys. So we're on 86% is saying yes, absolutely. We've got about 17% saying yeah, definitely going to implement some of it. And so far, no one has said no, they're already covered. So I think lots of learnings and lots of takeaways there. I'll just let a few more people vote, and then I'll be able to share the results with you. So hopefully you can see that it ended on 74% of people who attended here today saying that, yes, absolutely, going to implement some of the stuff you guys shared today.
Wow, true influencers.
Stop it.
I'm going to start a TikTok account.
Oh dear, amazing. So have we had any questions in, Cassie, for the Q&A? Is there anything you want me to start with? Or any questions for Amanda or Matty?
Yeah, so shall I pitch the question to all of you, and you can all kind of take your approach to it and decide who's best to answer. Sure. The first question we've got here is around, how do you quickly respond and deliver training based on those things that are happening in the world? So obviously you've given us an example, a really good example about how you did it for Corona. What other things are you able to be reactive to, and what does that approach look like?
Who do you want to take that?
Who wants to go first?
I'm happy to take that.
Yeah, go for it.
And I would say it is that self-led piece. It's perhaps not natural for learning professionals, but you have to relinquish the control of pushing content to your people. If you enable the right conditions, if it's relevant to them, they will find it and they will use it. So make sure the blend is there, make sure the content is designed in the right way, make sure it's the right content at the right time, and have really good conversations with your business. Don't make assumptions about what's needed based on this is what traditional learning has looked like, because it's a new world. So I think if you have easily accessible blended content, you can kind of react to anything. You just build out those pathways as the world progresses.
That's definitely really important. And I think one thing to say on that from my perspective is you shouldn't underestimate the importance of the fact that something is relevant and a chance to learn, and try not to kind of see everything as having to be perfect. You know, if something's happening like corona and everyone's caught up in it and it's so consuming, the pace at which you respond is much more important than getting it 100% right the first time. Like, get some content out there, get people talking, get people engaging, and just, you know, try and build stuff whilst it's so pertinent for them.
I think the other thing I would add to that, like 100% agree. I think there's something about how you react to stuff happening across the world. And I don't know about anybody else, but I've certainly learned from the COVID thing to probably let go a little bit and not be so planned and structured, and see opportunities, whereas I'd have probably gone into a bit of a panic before. And I guess the one thing that's certain is the world is going to change. So is it more about us and our mindset and how we see that, and the reacting to it is, there's always an opportunity as opposed to it's disruptive. So yes.
Yeah, so important.
Amazing. Thanks, guys. Some more questions coming in here now. One from Carol asking, did GVC offer a range of languages for the content offered, or was it in English?
We did a few things. So certain pieces are multi-language, and then we do things like there's a lot of built-in features now to traditional software that people might not be aware of. So like when you're delivering a webinar, you can enable live subtitle, live translation, things like that. So I would say let the technology do the work for you, but I wouldn't say we're anywhere near perfect. We are an English-speaking business, so primarily it was delivered in English, but with tools and technology available for translation if people felt they needed it.
Perfect. Hopefully that answers your question, Carol. A question here from Donna asking, some learning is mandatory and business critical. How would you approach that? People don't always have the choice, so what would your best engagement tips be?
It's really interesting question, because we were having an internal chat about that only yesterday. And how do we make mandatory training like not feel like it's mandatory? Because let's be honest, there's some stuff that we have to do. It's essential. It's potentially a bit more dry. And we're not there yet, so I don't have any tips, but definitely in terms of some of the ideas that we were thinking about is making it a bit competitive. There's one thing certainly about our business is around that kind of concept of league tables, and everybody wants to win, so kind of introducing a little bit of competition to it, which function or which team are ahead of the game. Also talking about almost like having almost like mandatory month. So everybody can be focused on, I need to do it now. Everybody's in the same boat, and actually also talked about, is there an opportunity for us to facilitate some of the more mandatory stuff, perhaps in a different way than what we've done before? So a team gets together in a room and all does the mandatory training together. So even though a lot of that will be self-led through our LMS, is there an opportunity for teams to come together virtually to say, right, let's go through the GDPR training, or let's do the compliance module today. Who's the first person to get 10 out of 10 on the quiz? So kind of almost make those mandatory things a little bit more again about that community and connection. So I think there's lots of opportunities. We're yet to go there, but it's on our roadmap. So if anyone's got any tips to share with us about that would be amazing.
I have a lot of plans in terms of how you design that. I think it traditionally looks like e-modules because that's what's easiest for the learning team. because we need that data if we're audited. This percentage of people have done that training. It doesn't have to be an e-module. It doesn't have to be on LMS. It can be a social conversation. It can be grounded in reality of the real world workplace. I think we've all probably done that fire extinguisher training, what's for what fire, 20 times in our career. And I bet we'd all stop and think, oh, which one's for which if there was a fire? So the way that content is traditionally designed is not designed in a way that helps people remember. So you're not actually learning, you're just box ticking. So it's really ripping up that traditional rule book and thinking, how does learning actually take place and how do you enable that?
Yeah, and just kind of focusing on, like you pulled that out, Matty, the kind of real world relevance and the practical elements. At the end of the day, like, compliance is unavoidable, but like, how do we strip it back so that we're not just giving people all the theory behind it, we're giving them the stuff that is going to be practically relevant to them, both at the time when they're taking the content, but also as a takeaway if they want to come back to it, and thinking about those different paths through which we reach the content is really important.
And that's key, is to resist the urge of blanket delivery. I've never seen in a business compliance training delivered bespoke to different departments. Or you might get a retail and corporate, and that'll kind of be it. 50% of the content will not be relevant to the 100% of the audience if it's a blanket approach. It's got to be individualized, personalized conversation.
Yeah, and that's why microlearning's great.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, guys. I'm just conscious of time. We've had a few people saying thank you very much for joining us. If the speakers, you're still available to stay on and answer a few more questions. We've got some more questions from the audience. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And anyone who has to shoot off, thank you so much for joining us today. If you're available to stick around, we'll be answering a few more questions. So another one from an anonymous attendee: how do you collect feedback and how often do you do it?
Really good question. With Moments That Matter, the program I talked around, we did some traditional like feedback, happy sheet type stuff around the webinars. But with like the read, the do, the discuss, we just had conversations. I didn't collect metrics. Our intranet, by its design, I could see how many views we were getting and things like that. But I certainly wouldn't collate that data, publish it, and then pat ourselves on the back for a job well done. It was just about human, honest conversation. I see it a lot. People will say, we got 80% completion. I think, so what? What did that actually do for your business? It's vanity around what makes learning professionals feel better. I would say that's why the partner model is so great, is you've just got to get into your business and have chats with people.
Yeah, and part of what I talked about, our new team structure, and we haven't again even touched the surface with it, but bringing in an internal function to look after learning experience is going much further than actually, how do I get feedback? It's kind of almost irrelevant. What we want to really measure is that longer term shift in behavior or new skills learned, and then really link it to engagement and how people love working here. What does that career longevity look like? How long do people stay, and what do they say about us? So kind of really broad and lots to do.
Sorry, I was just going to say those links between culture and learning are just so important.
We're delivering something at the minute where I keep looking at the NPS score because we're doing a traditional happy sheet, and I'm like, we're holding our nerve a little bit because it's been designed to shift behavior. It's not been designed to get a 10 out of 10 score. It's been designed to change the way that people experience learning at this business, to step us on to what we want to do next year. So it's that bold and bravery as well. Don't be led too much by feedback, because what people need is often different to what they want.
Yeah, it can create a bit of an echo chamber sometimes, can't it? Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Another question. Someone's asking, can you tell us a bit more about collaborating with other teams? So marketing and comms is a must, but is there anything else you would suggest?
When I was curating content for this program, I deliberately engaged the areas of the business where I knew historically didn't engage in learning, and they were the leaders that I went after to lead this program. And I think that had a huge impact on the engagement levels we got. So I think we go to marketing and people like that, that's a must because that's what we're used to. A leader that runs product development is just as able to position and enable learning, and will probably get a bigger audience because they're not usually seen in that light. So I went after like our engineers and our product people and our real tech people that wouldn't usually get involved in this space, and that had really positive outcomes for us.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that point, when we did have people who weren't the usual suspects turning up and being advocates for what we were doing, we'd always go out of our way to connect with them after and say thank you, that was really valuable, the response we got, and just provide that validation so that everybody felt that almost the crowd cheering on and further validation. I want to do more of this. This feels like a really good thing to be involved in. We'll definitely keep that up.
Yeah, champions.
Yeah.
Perfect. This is a question linked to the engagement of some of the results. Did you happen to notice any difference in user adoption by age demographics? So, did you? Sorry, Matty.
You go. I think.
Oh no, I was just going to say. So, did you see any difference in terms of age of your users based on how engaged they were with the content?
So we don't collect that kind of demographic data in terms of learner usage. I was very mindful of it in the design and how you must build modern learning to play to different generations and different experiences of the workplace. What I did see the difference in are those areas like product and tech people that would usually not engage in the learning space for us. I saw a big difference in them getting involved because they could do it without having to get involved in that social element. They could just do it at their own pace in their own way if they wanted to. We had a lot of people that would join our webinars and never say a word, but they would join every week without fail. I think in a lot of ways, virtual opportunity, it's safer for people that are nervous around learning, that they can sit behind their computer, get involved without the spotlight on them. So didn't see difference in age because we don't collect that. But moving to a virtual delivery, we definitely saw a difference in positive adoption in areas that we wouldn't usually see.
Amazing. Thanks, Matty. Another question here from Simon. Did you have any classroom training or workshops that you transferred to online virtual e-learning? And if you did do it, what was the feedback like?
I'll take that one if that's okay. So I guess the answer, short term, yes, and that's kind of where we are now. So the program that we talked about today was reacting to virtually leading in that current kind of lockdown situation. We've come out of that 14-week period now, and what we've taken is what I mentioned was our roadmap for leadership program and also our kind of people manager program, and now we're going out with that virtually. So we've just this week launched our first module of our management stuff, and it looks really different. What we've done is kept the content and the integrity of the themes exactly the same, because we've done a lot of analysis to identify what it was we were going to put in those programs. They weren't just off the shelf things, they were things that we'd really put some thought into designing and building based on what we knew that our people needed. So we're keeping the same themes. The difference looking like it's virtual, we're still facilitating it. We're using breakout room functionality, lots of kind of pre-engagements and pre-reading questionnaires, and obviously a lot shorter, maximum kind of 90 minutes, really cross-fertilizing groups, using that opportunity breakout rooms and connecting and sharing, and actually getting people involved. So we'll absolutely pick that up again and look to do that more in a classroom type version next year, hopefully. But we'll have a real lens on what I mentioned earlier around that's the opportunity to practice. So we're keeping the virtual stuff that we're doing now much more around kind of models, best practice, leadership sharing, and then we'll do the practice stuff when we're back together. So yeah, absolutely, we've just kind of adapted it.
I would say a watch out for people that design as well. There's a lot of companies doing a lot of virtual online stuff now, so you need to set yourself apart. I'm going to share some pictures on LinkedIn later. We've got quite a cool technology setup in the way that we're delivering it. You've really got to think about that novelty bow that you wrap your learning in, because otherwise it will just blend into the massive stuff that's being peddled at the moment.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, last couple of questions. Don't want to hold you guys for much longer. Annie's asking, can we hear a little bit more about the skills in your learning team and the skills that you needed?
In the team itself, or the skills we delivered in the programme?
I think it's the skills within your learning team. So the skills, so, you know, you talked a little bit about a reshuffle. So the skills that you needed within your team.
Yeah. So I think the most important thing isn't the skills. It was about the passion, the energy, getting the team into a place where we could all play together. We're all in new roles, right? So we're all learning as we're going, and those skills look like everything from how do I say no? How do I partner in a way that's still where I still maintain that relationship? Right through to how do I design a piece of training? What does that look like? What do we mean by learning experience? How are we going to measure that? And we're outside of the stuff we talked about today, we've got everything a real end on our agenda. So we're building out an onboarding program. We're looking at everything within the suite that normally sit in learning. So we're kind of really learning as we're going around those skills. I think the most important thing for us as a team is we stay connected and we learn from each other and we learn as we go. And I think there's something also about that environment where we're not going to get it right. It's new to us, it's new to our business, so it's kind of okay to fail. And the one thing we do have is we all have learning plans, so we're all really focused on what our own individual piece looks like and what do we want to do and what are we going for as individuals, just to keep us fresh and ahead of the game and keep us improving and developing as we go.
And just to add to that, I mean, self-centered because of my role, but I would say find yourself somebody that knows what good learning looks like in this moment. Science has caught up. There's a load of research about what learning should look like, how it should be crafted, what works and what doesn't. If you've got people in your team that still peddle, you know, you're a visual, audio or kinesthetic learner, or the 70-20-10 model, or things like that are really outdated, it's maybe time to get off the hamster wheel and just look around, because learning looks very differently now. So I think a key skill is having somebody in your team that really understands that and has that depth of expertise.
Yeah, and just questioning things, right? Like, you know, that's one of the things we say at Thrive, is just asking the right questions. Like, you know, if people don't like this sort of learning, why don't they like it? And just reaching out to real people and asking for their advice is just so important.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And one more, I'm going to pitch one more. So someone's asking for tips on how to initiate online discussion for a passive audience. So, or the opposite, how to manage a very interactive group.
My favourite thing to start any interaction with, like you did today, is a poll, but a poll on something that is really safe to get involved in. So we used to start with a, where are you joining us from today? Are you in the kitchen? Are you in the dining room? Are you in the garden? And then we'd move on to really open-ended questions where we'd say answer with a GIF rather than words. So I think it's about creating that psychological safety really early on in a learning experience. But on the flip side, in terms of if you've got a really over-engaged audience, I would say do what you're doing here today. Give people the freedom to keep the learning going, but give them the freedom. If they need to leave, they can leave. Capture the insight and then share it after. Learning shouldn't be a one-off event. It should be continuous. So does it matter if you don't get through 80% of your agenda? Do it next time. It shouldn't be a one-off intervention. So I would say if you've got the other extreme, foster that, encourage it more. That's the brilliant place to be.
Yeah. And mirror how you do it in your personal life. Like at the end of the day, most of us, I'd be surprised if there are many people that don't use, social media platforms and are engaging and creating posts and content on there all of the time. So I guess it's, you can apply similar principles, right? If you want to engage someone and get their attention, then think
Make
about
it
how you
their session, not yours, and they'll get involved.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. And I think we'll end it there on the topic of too much discussion. I know we're having lots of fun, but we've run over 15 minutes or so, but I think we've got a great core audience here who have absolutely loved everything that you guys have shared today. We had lots of thank yous, lots of comments saying what a great session it was, how interesting all the insight was, and obviously that poll spoke for itself at the end in terms of everyone taking things away and implementing them to drive self-led learning within their own organisation. So what's left to say really is thank you everyone for tuning in, and a massive thank you to Emma, Matty and Amanda joining us today and sharing all that insight.
Thanks Matty and Amanda.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks everybody.
And we'll end it there. Bye everyone.
Bye.